I married Amanda 6 years ago when I was 31 and she was 28. We met through mutual friends at a party in Chicago, one of those situations where someone brings their coworker and that coworker brings their roommate, and suddenly you're talking to someone for 3 hours straight about nothing important. She was funny and sharp, and I liked that she didn't take everything so seriously. We dated for a year before I proposed. Standard story, nothing dramatic. Here's the thing nobody tells you about when you get married. My parents are well off, not rich, but comfortable. And when Amanda and I got engaged, they offered to help us buy a house. Not give us money directly, but put down a significant portion of the down payment as a wedding gift. My dad sat me down and explained they wanted to do this because they'd done well in their lives and wanted to help us start strong. The catch was complicated. They'd had issues with my older brother Dominic years back where he'd burned through money they'd given him, and there'd been legal problems getting it back when his marriage fell apart. So, my parents' lawyer suggested everything go in Amanda's name to avoid any potential issues with creditors or business liabilities I might have in the future. I was working as an independent consultant then, dealing with contract work that could be unpredictable. My parents worried about liability and wanted to protect their investment. Amanda and I talked about it, and she seemed uncomfortable with the idea at first. She kept saying it didn't feel right, that we should both be on everything. But my parents insisted, and their lawyer explained how it protected everyone involved. Looking back now, I see how convenient that was, how perfectly it set everything up. So we bought the house in Naperville. Nice neighborhood, good schools for the kids we planned to have eventually. Everything went in Amanda's name. The mortgage, the deed, all of it. My parents paid about 40% of the purchase price, and we took out a mortgage for the rest. Amanda and I split the mortgage payments from our joint account. It seemed fair. The first 3 years were fine, normal marriage stuff. We both worked, we had friends over. We talked about eventually having kids. Amanda worked in marketing for a pharmaceutical company and made decent money. I was doing consulting work that paid well but came in waves. Some months were great, others were tight. That's how contract work goes. Then 2 years ago, things started shifting. My consulting project started drying up. The market changed, and suddenly everyone wanted younger, cheaper contractors. I was scrambling to find work, and Amanda started making comments about how I needed to figure things out. Not in a supportive way, but in this dismissive tone like I was failing at something basic. She'd come home and ask what I'd accomplished that day, and when I'd talk about the proposals I'd sent out or the networking I'd done, she'd just nod and walk away. I started working on developing my own software products. Small applications and tools that could generate passive income. It meant long hours at my computer, working on coding and design and testing. Real work, but nothing Amanda could see as tangible results. She started calling it my hobby, started making jokes about me sitting at home playing on my computer all day. When I'd try to explain what I was building, she'd zone out or change the subject. My parents kept helping with the mortgage. That was part of their original plan. They contributed a set amount each month that covered about 60% of the payment. Amanda and I covered the rest from our joint account, which at that point was mostly her income, since my work had slowed down. She never said anything about my parents' contribution stopping, never suggested we didn't need their help. She just kept taking it as if it was owed to her. About 8 months ago, I noticed Amanda's behavior getting weirder. She'd be on her phone constantly, and when I'd walk into the room, she'd flip it over or switch apps quickly. She started going out more on weekends without inviting me. Girls' nights that happened every Friday. Dinner with coworkers that ran late. She'd come home smelling like wine and laughing about something that happened but would never give me real details. I'm not stupid. I started paying attention. I noticed she was dressing differently when she went out. Nicer clothes, more makeup, that kind of thing. I asked her about it once and she said she just wanted to feel good about herself, that she'd been feeling frumpy. Fair enough, I guess. But it was the way she said it, like I was the reason she felt frumpy, like my existence made her feel bad about herself. Then about 3 months ago, she started talking about her friend Kelsey more. Kelsey lived 2 streets over with her husband and their kids. Kelsey hosted these neighborhood barbecues every few months where everyone would gather in her backyard and drink wine and eat burgers and pretend we all liked each other more than we actually did. Amanda loved these events. She'd spend hours getting ready and would stay late socializing while I usually made an excuse to leave early. In May, Kelsey hosted another barbecue. It was a Saturday afternoon and the weather was perfect. Amanda spent 2 hours getting ready, changing outfits 3 times before settling on this sundress she'd never worn before. She kept checking herself in the mirror and asking if she looked okay. I told her she looked great. She barely acknowledged it. We walked over to Kelsey's house around 4 in the afternoon. Their backyard was set up with tables and a grill and string lights, and about 20 people were already there. The usual crowd. Neighbors I recognized but didn't really know. Amanda immediately went off to find Kelsey and some other women. while I grabbed a beer and stood near the grill talking to Alan, another guy from the neighborhood who seemed equally uncomfortable at these things. I stayed for about an hour making small talk and eating a burger and drinking 2 beers. Then I told Amanda I was heading home. She was already on her second glass of wine and barely looked at me when I said I was leaving. She just waved and went back to her conversation. Normal for us at these events. I walked back to our house and went inside. I'd planned to work on debugging some code issues I'd been dealing with all week, but after about 30 minutes, I realized I'd left my phone at Kelsey's house. I'd set it down on one of the patio tables and walked off without it. I needed it because I was expecting a call from a potential client that evening. So I walked back over to Kelsey's house. It was around 5:30 and starting to get darker. The party was still going and I could hear laughing and music from the backyard. I went around the side of the house instead of going through the front door because I knew exactly where I'd left my phone and figured I could just grab it and leave without bothering anyone. That's when I heard Amanda's voice from the other side of the fence. The side yard was separated from the backyard by a tall wooden fence with a gate. I was on the side yard approaching the gate when I heard her talking. She sounded different, louder, that wine-drunk tone she got after a few glasses. She said something about me being pathetic. I stopped walking. Then I heard other voices, women I didn't recognize, laughing. Someone asked Amanda something I couldn't quite hear. Amanda's voice got louder, and she said he sits at home all day working on projects, which is just code for playing video games and pretending he's busy. More laughing. I stood there on the other side of the fence, completely still. Someone asked why she stayed with me. Amanda's voice was so clear when she answered. She said his parents pay most of our mortgage and the idiot signed everything over to me, so I'm just waiting for his inheritance to come through and then I'm done. Already talked to a lawyer about it. I heard Kelsey's voice asking if I knew about any of this. Amanda laughed and said I was too stupid to notice anything, that I still brought her flowers every week like we were newlyweds, that I'd even written her love poems last week when we'd had a fight. The women howled with laughter. I grabbed my phone from the patio table without anyone seeing me and walked back home. The whole walk I kept replaying what I'd heard. Not just the words, but the tone, the certainty in her voice. The way she'd described me like I was some pathetic joke she was stuck with temporarily. When I got home, I sat at my desk and opened my laptop. I started going through our financial documents. Every bank statement, every mortgage payment, every account we had. I pulled up the deed to the house and read through it carefully. Everything was in Amanda's name exactly like I'd known, but hadn't really thought about in years. I looked at my parents' contribution history. 6 years of them paying anywhere from 50 to 70% of our monthly mortgage depending on the month. Tens of thousands of dollars they'd put into a house they had no legal claim to because their son's name wasn't on anything. I opened my email and started searching for old conversations with Amanda about finances, about the house, about our future plans. I went back through years of messages looking for anything that might be useful. Then I started documenting everything I'd heard at the barbecue. I wrote down every word I could remember while it was still fresh. Around 9 that night, Amanda came home. She was drunk and happy and went straight to the bedroom without really acknowledging me. I heard her getting ready for bed, and then everything went quiet. I stayed up until 3 in the morning going through documents and making lists and planning. See, here's what Amanda didn't know about me. Those projects she mocked weren't hobbies. Over the past 2 years, I'd been building and launching 3 separate software applications. Small tools that businesses use for workflow management and data organization. Nothing huge, but they'd started generating income. Real income that went into a separate business account I'd set up 18 months ago. Amanda knew I had business accounts, but she never asked for details and I never offered them. She assumed I was barely making anything because I'd let her assume that. The joint account we shared showed my minimal consulting income, but not the growing revenue from my software products. I'd been planning for something like this without realizing it. Not the exact scenario, but I'd known for months that something was wrong in our marriage. I'd known Amanda was pulling away and I'd made sure to protect myself financially. Call it instinct or paranoia, but I'd started separating my assets and building something she couldn't touch. Now I knew exactly what she was planning, and I knew she thought I was too stupid to figure it out. She'd told a group of neighbors I was an idiot who didn't notice anything. She'd laughed about the poems I'd written her. She'd called me pathetic to people who lived 2 streets away from us. I spent the next week acting completely normal. I brought Amanda flowers that Wednesday like I always did. She accepted them with barely a smile. I made dinner and asked about her day, and she gave me minimal responses while scrolling through her phone. I wrote her another poem and left it on her pillow. She didn't mention it. The following Saturday was our 6-year wedding anniversary. Amanda had forgotten about it or pretended to forget. I'd made reservations at the restaurant where we'd had our first date. When I mentioned it that morning, she seemed annoyed but agreed to go. We sat across from each other at dinner. and I watched her check her phone 3 times in the first 15 minutes. I asked her what was wrong, and she said nothing was wrong. She was just tired from work. I told her I loved her, and she said she loved me too, but it sounded automatic, rehearsed. We went home and she went straight to bed. I stayed up researching divorce attorneys and property law in Illinois. I read about what happens when one spouse owns all marital property. I learned about constructive trusts and unjust enrichment and how courts handle situations where assets are unfairly distributed. Then I started making calls. I contacted 3 different attorneys over the next 2 weeks and explained my situation to each one. I showed them the documentation of my parents' contributions. I explained how everything had been put in Amanda's name at their lawyer's suggestion. I showed them proof of my income from my software products and how it had been growing steadily. 2 of the attorneys told me I had options, but it would be complicated. The third attorney, a woman named Jennifer who'd been practicing family law for 20 years, told me I had a strong case for multiple claims and she could help me build something airtight. I hired Jennifer that day. She told me what I needed to document and how I needed to prepare. She explained that timing would be everything and that I shouldn't make any moves until I had everything lined up exactly right. So I waited. I kept acting like nothing had changed. I kept bringing Amanda flowers and writing her poems and asking about her day. She kept dismissing me and going out with Kelsey and checking her phone constantly. I kept documenting everything while building my case with Jennifer. Last week, Amanda came home and told me Kelsey was hosting another barbecue next Saturday. She said it casually like she was mentioning the weather. She asked if I wanted to come or if I'd rather stay home. I told her I'd come for a bit. She looked almost disappointed. I've spent 6 years in this marriage. 6 years building a life with someone who apparently saw me as a temporary inconvenience. Someone who laughed about me to neighbors while drinking wine in someone's backyard. Someone who called me pathetic and stupid and said she was just waiting for my parents to die so she could take everything and leave. She thinks I don't know. She thinks I'm too oblivious to notice what she's planning. She thinks she's smarter than me because she has the house in her name and a lawyer ready to file papers. What Amanda doesn't know is that I've been preparing too. And unlike her, I'm not planning to wait for anyone to die. I'm done waiting for anything. The barbecue is tomorrow. Update 1. So that barbecue happened yesterday and I'm still processing everything, but I need to write this down while it's fresh because, holy hell, this is escalating faster than I expected. First off, thanks to everyone who commented on my original post. Some of you called me crazy for waiting and said I should have confronted Amanda immediately. Others told me to get evidence first and protect myself. I did both. Well, sort of. Let me explain what happened. Saturday afternoon arrived and Amanda spent her usual 2 hours getting ready. She tried on 4 different outfits before settling on jeans and this blue top I'd never seen before. She was in a good mood, which should have been my first red flag. She kept humming while doing her makeup and asked me twice if I was sure I wanted to come to the barbecue. I told her I wouldn't miss it. We walked over to Kelsey's house around 4. Same setup as last time with the string lights and tables and grill. About 15 people were already there, including Kelsey and her husband Ethan, and most of the usual neighborhood crowd. Amanda immediately went to find Kelsey and 2 other women, whose names I can never remember. They got wine and gathered near the back fence in almost the exact same spot where I'd overheard them last time. I grabbed a beer and stood near the grill talking to Alan again. He was going on about some issue with his homeowners association, and I was pretending to listen while watching Amanda across the yard. She was laughing and animated, and kept touching Kelsey's arm while talking. Every few minutes, she'd glance over at me and then say something that made the other women laugh. Around 5, I walked over to their little group. Amanda looked surprised when I approached. I asked if I could talk to her privately for a minute. She got this tight smile and said we could talk later, but I insisted. The other women exchanged looks and Amanda finally followed me to the side of the house, where it was quieter. I asked her if she was having fun. She said yes, obviously that's why people come to parties. I asked if she'd had fun at the last barbecue too. She looked confused and said she guessed, so why was I asking weird questions? I told her I'd heard her conversation at the last barbecue, the one where she called me pathetic and said she was waiting for my inheritance and already had a lawyer lined up. Amanda's face went completely blank for about 3 seconds. Then she laughed, actually laughed and said I must have misheard something or was being paranoid again. I told her I heard every word. I listed them back to her. The video games comment. The too stupid to notice comment. The part about my parents paying the mortgage and everything being in her name. The love poems she'd mocked. She stopped laughing. She asked how much I'd heard and I said enough. Then her whole demeanor changed. She got cold and direct and told me I needed to calm down and stop making a scene. I wasn't making a scene. We were alone. But apparently my knowing about her plan was somehow me being dramatic. I asked her how long she'd been planning this. She said she wasn't planning anything and I was twisting her words. I asked about the lawyer she'd mentioned. She said that was just girl talk and everyone complains about their spouse sometimes, and I was taking everything too seriously. I told her girl talk doesn't usually involve discussing inheritance timelines and property ownership. Amanda got defensive and started throwing things back at me. She said I'd been useless for 2 years, that she'd been carrying our household financially while I sat at home pretending to work, that my parents treated me like a child by paying our bills, and she was tired of being married to someone who couldn't support himself, that she'd married me thinking I was ambitious and successful, but I'd turned into someone who spent all day on a computer achieving nothing. I let her talk. I let her unload all of this anger she'd apparently been holding on to. When she finished, I asked her why she'd never said any of this to me before. Why she'd let me keep bringing her flowers and writing her poems if she hated me so much. She said she didn't hate me, but she was disappointed and frustrated and didn't know how to fix it. I told her she could have tried being honest instead of planning to leave me the second my parents died. She said that wasn't what she meant, and I was deliberately misunderstanding her. I said I understood perfectly, and we should go home and talk about this properly. Amanda refused. She said she wasn't leaving the party and I should go home if I was going to be like this. She actually turned and started walking back to the group. I followed her and said we needed to figure this out now. She turned around and told me to stop embarrassing her. Some of the other guests were starting to notice us. We walked home separately. She stayed at the party and I left. When I got home, I called my parents. My dad answered, and I told him I needed to talk to both of them immediately about something important. He put me on speaker and my mom came on the line. I explained what I'd overheard at the barbecue 3 weeks ago. I told them exactly what Amanda had said about waiting for their inheritance and having everything in her name. My mom went quiet. My dad asked if I was absolutely sure about what I'd heard. I told him I was standing 6 feet away behind a fence and heard every word clearly. Then I told him about my conversation with Amanda earlier today and how she'd tried to deny it, but then admitted she was disappointed in me and basically confirmed everything without directly admitting her plan. My dad said they needed to think about this and would call me back. 20 minutes later, my phone rang. My dad told me they'd discussed it and decided they were stopping the mortgage payments immediately. They'd been paying into a house they had no claim to for 6 years, and if Amanda was planning to take everything and leave, then they weren't contributing another dollar. He said they'd contact their lawyer first thing Monday morning to explore options for recovering what they'd already paid. I told them I'd already hired my own attorney. My mom asked when I'd done that, and I explained I'd been suspicious for weeks and wanted to protect myself. My dad said good, and that we should coordinate our legal approaches. He asked if Amanda knew about my software income, and I told him she had no idea how much I'd been making. He said to keep it that way for now. Amanda came home around 8. She walked in and immediately started talking like nothing had happened. She asked if I'd eaten dinner and said she'd had such a nice time at the party after I left. I told her my parents knew everything. She stopped in the middle of the kitchen and asked what I meant. I explained I'd called them and told them what she'd said about waiting for their inheritance and about the house being in her name. Amanda's face went red, and she started yelling that I had no right to involve them in our private business. I said she'd involve them the moment she started planning to steal a house they'd paid for. She said she wasn't stealing anything, and the house was legally hers. I said legal and moral weren't the same thing. She said I was being ridiculous and my parents would understand once they calmed down. I told her they'd already decided to stop paying the mortgage. That's when Amanda really lost it. She started screaming that they couldn't just stop paying and we had a mortgage due in 2 weeks and she couldn't cover it alone. I said that wasn't my problem since everything was in her name anyway. She said I lived here too and was responsible for the bills. I said I'd been responsible for bills using money that came from my parents, so really they'd been covering my share all along. Amanda grabbed her phone and tried calling my parents. My dad didn't answer. She called 3 more times, nothing. She texted my mom, no response. She was pacing around the kitchen frantically saying this was insane and I was destroying our marriage over something I'd misunderstood. I told her I hadn't misunderstood anything. She'd made her plans clear to half the neighborhood. She'd already talked to a lawyer. She'd been waiting for my parents to die so she could take everything. Those were her words, not mine. Amanda switched tactics. She started crying and saying she'd been frustrated and venting and didn't mean it the way it sounded. That she loved me and wanted to work on our marriage. That she'd been scared to tell me how unhappy she was because she didn't want to hurt me. I asked her if the lawyer was real and she admitted she'd consulted with someone but hadn't filed anything. I asked when she'd consulted with a lawyer. She said a few months ago. I asked why she'd do that if she wanted to work on our marriage. She said she was exploring options and trying to understand her rights. I said her rights to what, exactly? To a house my parents paid for. To an inheritance she'd been counting on. She didn't answer. I told her I was sleeping in the guest room and we'd figure out next steps this week. She said we needed to talk about the mortgage payment. I said she should figure that out since everything was in her name. She said I was being cruel and petty. I said I was being exactly as considerate as she'd been when planning her exit strategy. I've been in the guest room since Saturday night. Amanda has tried talking to me 4 times. Each time she alternates between apologizing and blaming me for overreacting. She keeps saying we can fix this if I just calm down and stop involving other people. She wants me to call my parents and tell them it was a misunderstanding. I checked our joint account this morning. Amanda transferred 60% of the balance into her personal account, the account that's just in her name. When I confronted her about it, she said she needed to make sure she could cover bills since my parents were abandoning us. I pointed out that she took way more than her share, and she said she was protecting herself because clearly I was planning something. My attorney, Jennifer, called me this morning. I'd emailed her an update yesterday. She said Amanda's behavior was actually helping our case. Every defensive move Amanda makes is evidence of her intent. Jennifer said we need to document everything and let Amanda keep digging herself deeper. She also said my parents' lawyer should file a claim for unjust enrichment to try to recover their contributions. My dad called this afternoon. He said their lawyer was preparing paperwork. He asked how I was holding up, and I told him honestly I was angry but focused. He said Amanda had sent my mom a long text message apologizing and explaining that she'd been struggling with depression and said things she didn't mean. My mom hadn't responded. Amanda came to the guest room door an hour ago. She said we needed to talk about money seriously, that the mortgage was due in 12 days and she couldn't pay it alone. I told her to figure it out. She said if we didn't pay the mortgage, we'd lose the house. I said it was her house, so that was her problem. She said I was being vindictive, and this wasn't the person she married. I told her the person she married was apparently a pathetic loser who was too stupid to notice what she was planning. She went quiet. Then she said she never should have said those things, but she'd been drunk and angry, and everyone says stupid stuff sometimes. I said most people don't tell their neighbors they're planning to inherit and run. Amanda is scared now. I can see it. She's realizing that her perfect plan has fallen apart and she's actually going to have to face consequences. But here's the thing. She's not sorry about what she planned. She's sorry she got caught. Every conversation we've had since Saturday has been her trying to minimize what she said or blame me for causing problems in our marriage that made her want to leave. Not once has she actually apologized for the betrayal itself, for planning to take everything, for calling me pathetic, for mocking the poems I wrote her. She's defended herself at every turn and tried to make this about me overreacting instead of her actual plan. My brother Dominic called me tonight. My parents had told him what was happening. He said Amanda always gave him weird vibes and he'd never trusted her but didn't want to say anything. He asked if I needed a place to stay and I said I was fine for now. He told me not to leave the house because that could hurt me legally. I told him I wasn't going anywhere. The mortgage payment is due in 12 days. Amanda's panicking about money. My parents aren't backing down. My attorney says we're building a strong case. And I'm sitting here in my guest room realizing I spent 6 years with someone who saw me as a temporary obstacle to a payout. Part of me wants to feel sad about it, but mostly I'm just angry. And I'm done being the pathetic loser she described to her friends. Update 2. It's been a week since my last update, and things have gotten significantly worse. Or better, depending on how you look at it. Amanda is spiraling, and I'm just watching it happen while documenting everything for Jennifer. So the mortgage payment was due yesterday. Amanda spent the entire week before that trying to figure out how to pay it. She kept coming to me asking for money, and I kept telling her I didn't have enough to cover what my parents usually paid. She'd get frustrated and say I must have something saved, and I'd remind her that she'd taken most of our joint account already, so what exactly did she expect me to contribute? Tuesday of last week, she tried a different approach. She sat me down at the kitchen table and said we needed to have a real conversation about our finances. She wanted to know exactly how much money I had and where it was. I asked her why she needed to know since everything was in her name anyway. She said we were still married and still supposed to be a team, and she needed to understand our complete financial picture. I told her my consulting work had been slow, which she already knew. She asked about my software projects and whether they were making any money. I said they were starting to generate some income, but nothing substantial. She asked how much exactly, and I said a few $100s a month. She didn't believe me. She said I'd been working on these projects for 2 years, and they had to be making more than that. I shrugged and said she was welcome to check, but I wasn't comfortable sharing my business account information given her recent behavior. That made her angry. She said I was being paranoid and controlling, and if I had nothing to hide, I should just show her. I said if she had nothing to hide, she wouldn't have been planning her exit strategy for months. We went in circles like that for an hour. She'd accuse me of hiding money. I'd point out she'd already hidden her intentions and consulted a divorce lawyer. She'd say that was different. I'd ask how. She'd change the subject back to the mortgage. Thursday, she tried involving Kelsey. Kelsey showed up at our door asking to talk to me. Amanda had apparently told her that I was refusing to help with the mortgage and we were going to lose the house. Kelsey said she understood we were having problems, but surely I didn't want Amanda to lose her home. I told Kelsey the house wasn't Amanda's home. It was a house my parents had paid for that happened to be in Amanda's name. Kelsey looked confused and said Amanda told her we'd bought it together. I said Amanda had told people a lot of things that weren't quite accurate. Kelsey left looking uncomfortable. An hour later, Amanda came home furious. She said I'd made her look like a liar to her best friend. I said she'd made herself look like a liar by lying. She said I was deliberately sabotaging her relationships and trying to isolate her. I said she'd sabotaged our marriage by planning to leave me the second she got my inheritance. Friday, Amanda made the mortgage payment. I have no idea where she got the money. She didn't ask me for it and didn't tell me how she covered it. She just announced at dinner that it was handled and I didn't need to worry about it. I wasn't worried. I told her that, and she got quiet. Then Sunday happened. Sunday was when everything shifted because Amanda found my business bank statements. I'd printed them out for Jennifer and left them in my desk drawer in the home office. Amanda went through my desk. She told me later she was looking for our insurance documents, but I know she was snooping. She came into the guest room where I was working on my laptop and threw the statements at me. She was shaking. She was so angry. She said I'd been lying to her about money, that my software products were generating over $8,000 a month and had been for the past 6 months, that I'd been hiding this from her while she struggled to pay bills. I stayed calm. I told her I hadn't been hiding anything. I just hadn't volunteered information she never asked for. She said that was semantics, and I knew exactly what I was doing. I said yes, I did. I'd been protecting my assets from someone who'd already announced her plan to take everything and leave. Amanda said that money was marital property, that we were still married and she had a right to know about my income. I said she had a right to know about income that went into our joint account, which this didn't. This was business income from my own software company that I'd built while she was calling it a hobby and telling neighbors I played video games all day. She said it didn't matter how I felt about her comments. The law was clear that income earned during marriage was shared. I told her she could talk to her lawyer about it, but from what Jennifer had told me, it wasn't that simple. She asked who Jennifer was, and I said my attorney. She went pale. She asked when I'd hired an attorney, and I said about 3 weeks ago. Amanda started crying. Real crying, not the manipulative kind. She said she couldn't believe I'd gone behind her back and hired a lawyer. I said she'd gone behind my back and hired a lawyer months ago, so I wasn't sure what the difference was. She said the difference was she'd only consulted someone while I was actively building a case. I said yes, that's exactly what I was doing. She wanted to know what kind of case. I told her Jennifer was helping me establish that the house was purchased with my parents' money, and Amanda had no right to keep it if we divorced, that we were documenting her statements about waiting for my inheritance, that we had witnesses who heard her mock me at the barbecue, that her behavior over the past week had only strengthened our position. Amanda said I couldn't do this, that the house was legally hers and there was nothing I could do about that. I said we'd see what a judge thought about unjust enrichment and constructive trusts. She asked what those terms meant, and I explained that when someone benefits unfairly from assets they didn't pay for, courts can intervene. Her face changed when she understood what I was saying. She tried switching tactics again. She said we didn't need to involve lawyers and judges, that we could work this out ourselves, that she'd been wrong to say those things at the barbecue and she understood why I was hurt, but we could fix this. I asked her how exactly we'd fix it. She said we could go to counseling and work on our communication and rebuild trust. I asked her if she actually wanted to stay married or if she just wanted to stay married until she got what she was planning to take. She insisted she wanted to stay married. I asked her why she'd consulted a divorce attorney then. She said she'd been confused and scared and didn't know what else to do. I asked confused about what? She said confused about our relationship and where it was going. I told her our relationship had been going exactly where she wanted it to go, toward her owning everything while I funded it with my parents' money. She said that wasn't fair, and she'd never asked for things to be set up this way. I reminded her that actually my parents had suggested it and she'd agreed to it. She said she'd been uncomfortable with it from the start. I said her discomfort hadn't stopped her from accepting 6 years of mortgage payments. We argued for 2 hours. She kept trying to find an angle that made her look less calculating. She brought up how I'd been underemployed for 2 years, how she'd been the primary earner, how she'd shouldered most of the financial responsibility. I pointed out she'd shouldered it with my parents' money while planning her exit. She said I kept bringing that up like it proved something. I said it proved everything. Monday morning, my dad called. His lawyer had filed a claim against Amanda for unjust enrichment. They were seeking repayment of all mortgage contributions plus interest. Amanda was officially being sued by my parents. The papers were being served to her at work that afternoon. I didn't tell Amanda about it. I let her find out when the process server showed up. She called me at 3 screaming. She said my parents were suing her, and how could I let this happen? I said I didn't let it happen. They made their own decision. She said I could stop this if I wanted to. I asked why I would want to do that. She said because we were married, and I was supposed to be on her side. I told her I'd been on her side for 6 years while she was apparently waiting for me to become an orphan so she could cash out. She hung up on me. She came home at 6 and went straight to our bedroom and slammed the door. I heard her on the phone talking to someone. I couldn't make out words, but the tone was frantic. She stayed in there for 3 hours. When she came out, she looked exhausted. She told me she'd talked to her lawyer, that her lawyer said my parents' case had merit but wasn't guaranteed to win, that it would depend on whether they could prove the house was purchased with the expectation of repayment or whether it was a gift. She said her lawyer advised her to try to settle before this went to trial. I said that was between her and my parents. She said I could talk to my parents and convince them to drop it. I said, why would I do that when they were trying to recover money that rightfully belonged to them? She said the money was a gift, not a loan. I said if it was a gift, they wouldn't have stopped paying when they found out about her plans. Amanda asked what I wanted from her. I said I wanted her to be honest for once. She said she'd been honest. I said she'd been caught and was now trying to minimize damage. There was a difference. She said I was being cruel and enjoying watching her suffer. I said I wasn't enjoying anything, but I wasn't going to protect her from consequences of her own choices either. Yesterday, Amanda's parents called her. I was in the kitchen when she answered, and I heard her side of the conversation. She'd apparently told them what was happening, and they were upset. Her dad wanted to talk to me. Amanda said no, I wouldn't talk to him, and hung up. Then she told me her parents thought I was being vindictive and unreasonable. I said her parents didn't have all the information. She said they had enough. I asked if she'd told them about calling me pathetic and planning to wait for my inheritance. She went quiet. I said that's what I thought. Today, Jennifer called with an update. She said Amanda's lawyer had reached out trying to negotiate. They wanted to discuss a settlement that would avoid both the divorce proceedings and my parents' lawsuit. Jennifer asked what I wanted to do. I told her I wanted to see what they were offering, but I wasn't agreeing to anything that let Amanda keep what she'd been planning to take. Jennifer said she'd set up a meeting for next week. She said based on Amanda's behavior over the past 2 weeks, we had a strong case for demonstrating her intent. She also said my software income was going to be an issue because Amanda's lawyer would argue it was a marital property. I told Jennifer I understood, but I wasn't giving Amanda half of something I'd built while she was mocking me. Amanda knows about the settlement meeting. Her lawyer must have told her. She's been different since she found out. Quieter, more calculating. She's not crying anymore or trying to have emotional conversations. She's planning something. I can tell by the way she's watching me when she thinks I'm not paying attention. Last night she asked me if I was really going to destroy her over this. I said I wasn't destroying her. I was protecting myself. She said taking her house and making her pay back money she didn't have would destroy her. I said the house was never hers to begin with, and the money was never hers to keep. She said I'd changed and become someone she didn't recognize. I said I'd always been this person, she just hadn't been paying attention. The settlement meeting is in 5 days. Amanda's lawyer apparently wants to propose that we divide everything 50-50 and call it even. Jennifer says that's not acceptable given the circumstances. She says we should push for me getting the house and Amanda getting nothing except whatever equity might exist after my parents' claim is satisfied, which based on current value, what they've paid would be essentially nothing. Amanda will fight that. I know she will. She's backed into a corner now and she's going to come out swinging. But here's what she doesn't understand. I've been ready for this fight since the moment I heard her laughing about me at that barbecue. She spent weeks planning her exit while I spent weeks planning her consequences. And unlike her, I don't have to wait for anyone to die to execute my plan. Final update. So this is probably going to be my last update because everything finally came to a head and honestly, I'm exhausted from dealing with this situation for the past 2 months. For everyone who's been following along, thanks for the support and the advice. And for the people who kept saying I should just let it go and move on, you'll see why that would have been the dumbest thing I could have done. The court date was set for yesterday. 6 weeks of waiting while Selena and Daryl kept trying different tactics to get me to drop everything. I'm going to walk you through what happened during those 6 weeks and then what went down in court because it was honestly better than I could have planned. Week 1, after my last update, Selena's mother Abigail contacted me again. She said she'd been talking to Selena about finances, and apparently Selena had been saving money but had spent most of it on things for Daryl. New clothes to impress him, trips they'd taken together, gifts she'd bought him. Abigail said Selena had about $4,000 in her account total. I told Abigail that was a start, but nowhere near what Selena owed me. Abigail asked if I'd be willing to accept the $4,000 plus monthly payments. I said maybe, but I wanted to know what happened to the rest of my property first. The laptop, the photo albums, the vintage shirts. Abigail said she'd asked Selena about it. 2 days later, I got a package delivered to my apartment. Inside was my laptop and one of the photo albums. The laptop had been factory reset, all my data wiped. The photo album was the least important one, mostly just pictures from random vacations. Everything that actually mattered was still missing. I texted Abigail asking about the rest. She said that was everything Selena had. I said that was a lie, and I had video evidence of Selena taking more than that. Week 2, Daryl messaged me from a different number because I'd blocked his original one. He said he and Selena had broken up because she was too dramatic and needy. He said he wanted me to know he wasn't involved in any of this anymore and I shouldn't include him in any legal action. I told him I'd never planned to include him in legal action because he wasn't the one who owed me money. He said good, and then asked if I could tell Selena to stop contacting him because she was blowing up his phone. So their relationship had already fallen apart. The guy who'd convinced Selena to leave me and planned this whole scheme had bailed. The second things got complicated. I didn't respond to Daryl, but I did feel a bit of satisfaction knowing Selena had destroyed her relationship with me for someone who didn't even stick around. Week 3, Selena showed up at my apartment complex gym. I was on the treadmill and suddenly she was on the one next to me. She was trying to act casual, like we'd just randomly ended up working out at the same time. She asked how I'd been. I ignored her and kept running. She said she missed me and missed our life together. I still didn't respond. She said she'd made terrible choices, but she'd learned from them and wanted a chance to make things right. I stopped the treadmill and looked at her directly. I asked if making things right included returning my grandfather's belongings and the money she owed me. She said she'd already returned what she could. I said she was lying. She asked why I couldn't just forgive her and move forward. I told her because she'd spent 6 months planning to destroy me financially and emotionally, and forgiveness wasn't something you earned by getting caught. She started crying on the treadmill. Other people in the gym were watching. She said I was being cruel and vindictive, and she didn't deserve this treatment. I said she deserved exactly what she was getting and walked out. I immediately went to the gym management and showed them my restraining order paperwork that I'd filed the week before. They banned Selena from the gym. Week 4, the police contacted me about the theft report. They said they'd investigated and found evidence that Selena had taken property that belonged to me, but since we'd been in a relationship and she'd lived in my apartment, it would be difficult to prosecute criminally. They suggested I pursue civil action instead, which I was already doing. They also said the restraining order had been approved and Selena needed to stay at least 100 yards away from me, my home, and my workplace. When Selena got served with the restraining order, she apparently had another breakdown. Abigail called me upset, saying I was taking things too far and ruining Selena's life. I reminded Abigail that Selena had tried to ruin mine first. Abigail said Selena was her daughter, and she had to support her, but she thought I was being unnecessarily harsh. I said she was welcome to her opinion. Week 5, I found out through a mutual acquaintance that Selena had been telling people her version of events. According to her, I was an abusive, controlling boyfriend who'd manipulated her for years. She said I'd isolated her from her friends, monitored her constantly, and threatened her when she tried to leave. She said the only reason she'd planned to take things from the apartment was because she'd paid for half of everything and deserved her share. The mutual acquaintance asked me if any of that was true. I sent them the audio recording from the coffee shop where Selena bragged about manipulating me. I sent them bank statements showing I'd paid for everything. I sent them the security footage of Selena stealing my belongings. The mutual acquaintance said they'd had no idea and apologized for believing Selena's story. They said several other people had heard Selena's version and believed it. So I started sending the evidence to other people who knew both of us. I wasn't trying to destroy Selena's reputation. I was just correcting the lies she'd been spreading. Within a few days, most of our mutual friends had seen the real story. Several of them reached out to apologize for judging me before knowing the facts. A few of Selena's close friends stopped talking to her after seeing the evidence. Week 6, 3 days before the court date, Selena hired a lawyer. I know this because her lawyer contacted me asking if I'd be willing to discuss a settlement before court. I said I was open to hearing their offer. The lawyer said Selena was willing to pay back $10,000 total in exchange for me dropping all other claims. $10,000 out of $41,000. I asked the lawyer if that was a serious offer. He said it was what Selena could realistically afford. I said Selena should have thought about what she could afford before she accumulated $41,000 in debt to me. He asked what I'd be willing to accept. I said the full amount plus return of all my property or I'd see them in court. The lawyer said I was being unreasonable, and the court would likely not award me the full amount anyway. I said we'd find out in 3 days. He said he'd advise his client to prepare for trial. I said good luck with that. Court day. Yesterday. I showed up an hour early with 2 folders full of evidence and a timeline I'd created showing every purchase, every expense, every lie Selena had told. I was wearing a suit because I wanted to look professional. I'd even gotten a haircut the day before. Selena arrived about 30 minutes before our scheduled time with her lawyer and her mother. She looked terrible. She'd lost weight and her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail. She was wearing clothes I didn't recognize, probably borrowed from her mother. She wouldn't look at me. Her lawyer asked if we could speak privately before going in front of the judge. We went into a small conference room, me and my documentation on one side of the table, Selena and her lawyer on the other, with Abigail sitting in the corner. The lawyer started by saying this case was clearly emotionally charged and maybe we could find a resolution without involving the judge. I said I was listening. He asked what my bottom line was. I said $41,832 plus the return of all my property. He said that wasn't realistic. I opened my first folder and I started laying out evidence on the table. Bank statements showing every purchase I'd made for Selena, credit card statements with her charges, receipts for the car with my name on the title, receipts for furniture and electronics, the lease to my apartment, text messages where Selena had asked me to pay for things, screenshots of Venmo transactions where I'd sent her money. Then I pulled out my laptop and played the audio from the coffee shop. The whole conversation where Selena discussed how pathetic I was, how she was planning to clean me out, how she'd been texting Daryl every night, how I'd come home to an empty apartment. Her lawyer's face changed as he listened. When it finished, he looked at Selena and asked if that was her voice. She said yes, but I'd taken it out of context. He asked what context made that conversation acceptable. She didn't have an answer. Then I played the security camera footage from my apartment showing Selena taking my belongings and hiding them in her bags. Footage from multiple days showing her systematically going through my things and stealing them. Her lawyer watched the whole thing. He asked Selena where those items were now. She said she'd returned most of them. I said she'd returned less than half and the most valuable items were still missing. He asked her directly where my grandfather's belongings were. She said she didn't have them anymore. He asked what that meant. She said she'd given some things to Daryl before they broke up and she didn't know where he was now. Her lawyer closed his folder and looked at Selena with what I can only describe as disappointment. He said based on the evidence he was seeing, I had an extremely strong case and she would almost certainly lose if this went in front of a judge. He said the recordings and video footage would be admissible and damaging. He said the financial documentation was thorough and well organized. He said her best option was to negotiate a settlement she could actually live with. Selena started crying. She said she didn't have $40,000 and she'd never be able to pay it back. Her lawyer said that wasn't his problem. She should have thought of that before she took the actions that led to this situation. Abigail spoke up from the corner asking if there was any way to reduce the amount. The lawyer said not based on what he was seeing. I told them I'd be willing to accept a structured settlement. Selena would pay me $10,000 immediately, the $4,000 she supposedly had saved, plus $6,000 borrowed from wherever she could get it. Then she'd pay me $1,500 a month for 21 months, total of $41,500, with the extra as interest for my time and trouble. Her lawyer asked what would happen if she missed payments. I said I'd take her back to court and get a judgment that would wreck her credit for years. He asked if I'd agree to drop all other claims including the theft charges. I said yes, as long as she made every single payment on time. Selena asked where she was supposed to get $6,000 in the next week. Abigail said quietly that she could loan it to her, but Selena would need to pay her back too. Selena asked how she was supposed to afford $1,500 a month. I said she'd need to get a full-time job instead of working part-time retail. She said that wasn't fair. I said neither was planning to rob someone who'd supported you for 2 years. Her lawyer advised her to take the deal. He said if she went in front of the judge, she'd likely end up with a judgment for the full amount anyway, plus court costs, plus legal fees, and she'd have no payment plan. She'd just owe it all immediately, and I could garnish her wages for years. He said this way she at least had a structured plan. Selena looked at her mother. Abigail told her to take the deal. Selena asked me if I really hated her this much. I said I didn't hate her, I just wanted what was fair. She said taking all her money for the next 2 years wasn't fair. I said planning to destroy someone's life and steal their family heirlooms wasn't fair either. We signed the settlement agreement right there in the courthouse. Selena agreed to pay $10,000 within 7 days and then $1,500 a month starting the following month. If she missed a single payment, I could immediately file for a judgment for the remaining balance. She also agreed in writing that she'd attempted to obtain my belongings from Daryl and would continue trying. When we left the courthouse, Selena and her mother went one direction and I went the other. I didn't feel victorious exactly. I felt tired. But I also felt like justice had been served in a way that actually mattered. This morning, I received a bank transfer for $10,000. Selena made the first payment. I have 21 more monthly payments to look forward to. Every single month for the next year and 9 months, I'll get $1,500 from the woman who thought she could manipulate and rob me. And here's the thing that really gets me. If Selena had just been honest with me from the start and said she wanted to break up, I would have let her go. I would have probably let her keep the car, and I definitely wouldn't have asked for money back. I'm not a bad person. I just refuse to be played for a fool. She chose to plan an elaborate scheme to destroy me. She chose to steal from me. She chose to lie and manipulate and scheme for months. And when she got caught, she chose to lie more, to spread false stories about me, to try to play the victim. So yeah, now she gets to pay me back every cent while I move on with my life. I've already started dating someone new. I've gotten back into shape from going to the gym more. I've been promoted at work. My apartment is cleaner and more organized without Selena's mess everywhere. Life is actually pretty good. And every month when that $1,500 hits my account, I'll be reminded that trying to scam someone who's smarter than you think they are is always a bad idea. For everyone who followed this story and offered advice and support, thank you. For everyone who said I was being too harsh, I hope you understand now why I did what I did. And for anyone out there in a similar situation, protect yourself. Keep records. Trust your gut. And don't let anyone make you feel guilty for holding them accountable for their own choices. That's it. That's the end of the story. Selena tried to play me, got caught, and now she's paying for it literally. Justice served.